Welcome to Your Brain is Playing Tricks on You by Albert Moukheiber, a fascinating journey into the quirks and mysteries of the human mind. If you've ever wondered why people see the world so differently, why you sometimes make choices you can't explain, or why your brain seems to work against you at times, this book is your guide to understanding it all. Moukheiber invites us to explore the hidden mechanisms behind how we think, perceive, and remember. Through engaging stories, thought-provoking experiments, and relatable examples, he shows us how our brains aren't just passive observers of reality, they're active interpreters, constantly shaping the world we experience. By the end, you'll not only understand why your brain plays tricks on you, but you'll also gain the tools to outsmart it and make more intentional decisions. Why should you listen? Because this isn't just about neuroscience, it's about your life. Understanding how your mind works can help you navigate relationships, make better choices, and approach the world with curiosity and empathy. Whether you're here to improve yourself, deepen your understanding of others, or just enjoy a thought-provoking listen, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Let me ask you something. Do you believe what you see? Most of us would probably say, of course, I see it with my own eyes. But here's the twist. You don't really see the world with your eyes. You see it with your brain. Your eyes are just the messengers. They take in light, colors, and shapes from the world around you and pass the signals along to your brain. And guess what your brain does? It interprets, edits, and sometimes totally rewrites what's in front of you. Let me give you an example. Think about those optical illusions you've probably seen online. The ones that make you question whether a dress is blue and black or white and gold. That's not your eyes messing up, that's your brain trying to make sense of an image that has multiple interpretations. Your brain loves order and stability, so when it encounters something ambiguous, it works overtime to decide what's the most logical version of this. Sometimes, though, it picks the wrong answer, like thinking the dress is one color when half the internet swears it's the other. But that's not all. Your brain doesn't just interpret the world. It fills in gaps when it thinks something's missing. Ever done that experiment where you close one eye, look at a page, and suddenly a black dot in the picture vanishes? That's your brain at work again, covering up a blind spot in your vision and pretending it's all seamless. It's like a magician pulling off a trick. Your brain doesn't just show you the raw facts. It gives you the version of reality it thinks you need to see. And this editing isn't just about vision. Magicians use this quirk all the time. When they make a coin disappear, they're not fooling your eyes, they're fooling your brain. Your brain assumes the coin has moved from one hand to the other, so when it vanishes, you're left scratching your head, wondering how. The big takeaway? What you see isn't necessarily the truth, it's your brain's best guess. And sometimes that guess is spot on. Other times it's a little creative. Either way, it's proof that perception is a masterpiece of interpretation, not just observation. Here's a fun fact. Your brain is the greatest storyteller you'll ever meet. It's like a novelist with a never-ending deadline, constantly weaving together stories to make sense of the world around you. But here's the catch, it doesn't just tell stories about the world. It tells stories about you. And sometimes those stories are completely made up. Let me explain. Your brain is obsessed with coherence. It wants everything to make sense, even if it has to invent details to connect the dots. This is why, when your memory fails you, your brain steps in with a little creative flair. For instance, there's a fascinating condition called Anton syndrome, where people who are cortically blind, meaning their brain can't process vision, are convinced they can still see. Their brains fill in the blanks, making up visual details to keep the illusion alive. They aren't lying, they truly believe their version of reality. But it's not just people with rare conditions, this applies to all of us. Take memory, for example. You probably think of it as a mental filing cabinet, neatly storing events from your life. No, memory is more like a scrapbook, where your brain pastes together snippets of real events, guesswork, and emotions. Imagine trying to recall your last train ride. Odds are you'll remember things like the number of passengers or what they were wearing, even if your brain made those details up to complete the picture. Here's where it gets even wilder. Your brain doesn't just make up memories, it invents reasons for your actions. Researchers ran a fascinating experiment where participants were asked to pick their favorite photo out of two options. Then, a sneaky switcheroo happened. The researchers gave them the photo they didn't pick and asked them why they chose it. Most participants didn't notice the switch. Even more surprising, they confidently explained their choice, inventing reasons on the spot. This phenomenon is called choice blindness, and it's your brain's way of maintaining the story that you're in control even when you aren't. The bottom line? Your brain's #1 job is to keep your narrative intact. Whether it's rewriting memories, filling in gaps, or rationalizing your decisions, it's always working to create a story that feels true even if the facts don't always back it up. That's not just fascinating. It's kind of poetic, don't you think? Here's a question. How often do you think your brain gets things exactly right? The answer is rarely. But that's okay, because your brain isn't wired to be perfect. It's wired to be efficient. It works through shortcuts called heuristics, which are quick, rule-of-thumb strategies that help you make decisions without overloading your mental bandwidth. Think of heuristics as your brain's way of saying, close enough is good enough. Let's break it down. Imagine you're at a party, and someone flips a coin. The first toss is tails. Then the second toss is tails. Then the third. By the 10th toss, you're probably thinking, okay, something's up with this coin, it's got to be rigged. But statistically, every coin toss is independent, and the odds of tails showing up are still 50-50. Yet your brain can't help but look for a pattern. That's your heuristic at work. It's jumping to conclusions because your brain loves predictability. It's how it prepares for what comes next. These mental shortcuts are usually super helpful. They let you cross the street without needing to calculate the exact speed of an oncoming car, or decide to grab an umbrella when the sky looks stormy. But heuristics aren't perfect, and sometimes they lead us astray. For example, there's representativeness bias, where we judge things based on how much they fit our mental stereotype. Let's say you're introduced to someone who's shy and loves reading. Your brain might instantly assume they're a librarian even though statistically, they're more likely to be a farmer, just because there are way more farmers in the world. Another classic trap is the anchoring effect. When you're given a piece of information, say, the starting price of a car, it becomes your mental anchor. Even if the price drops significantly, your brain still thinks, what a deal, just because the initial number was so high. So what does this mean for you? Well, it's important to understand that your brain's shortcuts are designed to save time and energy, not to deliver flawless answers. They're why you sometimes make snap judgments or fall into cognitive biases. And that's okay. Life would be overwhelming if you had to analyze every single detail. But every now and then, it's worth slowing down, stepping back and asking yourself, am I really seeing the big picture, or just what my brain wants me to see? In the end, our approximations aren't flaws, they're survival tools. They help us navigate a complex world without getting bogged down by details. And when we pair them with a little awareness, that's when we can truly make smarter, more intentional choices. Stress is the modern-day villain, isn't it? We blame it for everything: sleepless nights, pounding headaches, and even that sudden craving for an entire tub of ice cream. But here's the kicker. Stress wasn't always the bad guy. In fact, stress is your body's ancient survival tool, finely tuned to help you escape danger. The problem? That tool wasn't designed for the kind of stress we face today. Let's go back in time. Picture a zebra grazing peacefully on the savannah. Suddenly, a lioness appears. The zebra's stress response kicks in, cranking up its heart rate, flooding its muscles with energy, and shutting down non-essentials like digestion. Why? Because in that moment, nothing matters except survival. The zebra sprints away, escapes the lioness, and once the threat is gone, its body goes back to normal. Stress did its job: short, sharp, and life-saving. Now let's fast forward to you, sitting at your desk, staring at an email from your boss with the subject line, urgent, we need to talk. Your brain reacts like you're face-to-face with a lioness. Heart racing, palms sweating, muscles tensing, its fight or flight mode in full swing. Except you're not running from a predator, you're just stressing over a meeting. The problem? That stress doesn't disappear once the email is dealt with. It lingers, turning into chronic stress, which can wreak havoc on your mind and body. Chronic stress is like a broken alarm that won't stop ringing. Over time, it drains your energy, weakens your immune system, and even rewires your brain to expect danger everywhere. And let's not forget burnout, that state where you're so mentally and physically exhausted that even small tasks feel insurmountable. But here's the good news. You can outsmart stress. Your body has an off switch, and tools like deep breathing, yoga, and mindfulness can help flip it. When you slow your breathing and relax your muscles, you're sending your brain a signal. Hey, it's cool. We're safe here. Your brain listens, your stress response dials down, and suddenly, that meeting with your boss feels less like a lioness and more like, well, just a conversation. One last thing. Stress isn't always a bad thing. A little stress before a big presentation or an important exam can sharpen your focus and boost performance. It's about balance. So, the next time you feel your heart race and your muscles tighten, don't panic. Recognize the signal. Breathe deeply, and remind yourself that you're not on the savannah. You've got this. Let's face it, most of us love being right. We cling to our beliefs like they're life rafts, confident that we've got it all figured out. But here's the truth. What feels like certainty is often just a trick your brain is playing on you. It's not that you're lying to yourself, it's that your brain is wired to prioritize what you already believe, even when evidence says otherwise. Let's dig into why this happens. When we encounter something new, like an article challenging our stance on a hot topic, say, genetically modified foods, our brain doesn't exactly approach it with an open mind. Instead, it scans for reasons to dismiss the argument if it doesn't align with what we already think. This mental shortcut is called motivated reasoning, and it's like having a lawyer in your head who's constantly building a case to defend your beliefs no matter what. Here's an experiment to illustrate the point. During the 2004 U.S. presidential election, researchers gathered die-hard Republicans and Democrats. They showed each group statements from their favorite candidate, George W. Bush or John Kerry, followed by contradictory statements from the same candidate. Predictably, participants were quick to excuse contradictions from their own guy while blasting the opposing candidate for being inconsistent. Even more fascinating, brain scans showed that emotional areas lit up during these mental gymnastics. In other words, it wasn't logic driving their conclusions, it was feelings. But this isn't just about politics. It happens in our daily lives, too. Think about moral issues like why most of us instinctively condemn incest. Even if we can't articulate why it feels wrong, our gut reaction is to reject it outright. Our beliefs and cultural upbringing shape these instincts, often bypassing logical reasoning entirely. So, what can we do about this? The answer isn't to abandon our beliefs entirely, it's to challenge them occasionally. Think of it like being a detective instead of a lawyer. Instead of defending your preconceived notions, ask yourself, what's the evidence? Could I be wrong? It's not easy, our brains crave the comfort of certainty, but being open to new perspectives makes us more flexible, thoughtful, and ultimately wiser. The next time you feel absolutely sure about something, pause and ask yourself, is this belief rock solid? Or is my brain just clinging to the familiar? You might be surprised at what you find. Have you ever done something that didn't quite align with your values, and then found yourself scrambling to justify it? Maybe you told yourself, it's fine, everyone does it, or it's not really a big deal. That uncomfortable tug of war between your actions and your beliefs? That's cognitive dissonance. And trust me, your brain hates it. Cognitive dissonance is like mental static. It happens when your actions, beliefs, or attitudes don't match up, and the result is a deep sense of unease. Your brain's solution? Rewriting the narrative to make everything feel consistent again. Think of it as your internal PR team spinning the story to protect your self-image. Here's an example. Imagine you're committed to healthy eating, but one night you devour an entire tub of ice cream. Instead of admitting you slipped up, your brain might create excuses. I had a stressful day, or it's okay because I worked out yesterday. These justifications help you bridge the gap between your actions, eating the ice cream, and your beliefs, staying healthy, so you can feel at peace again. But cognitive dissonance isn't just about food or minor choices, it can show up in big ways, too. Consider someone who prides themselves on being honest but gets caught in a lie. Admitting they lied would feel like a personal failure, so instead, they might rationalize. It wasn't a lie. It was just bending the truth to avoid hurting someone's feelings. Again, their brain is working overtime to protect their sense of self. One fascinating experiment demonstrates this perfectly. Researchers asked participants to complete a boring task, then paid them either $1 or $20 to tell someone else the task was fun. Surprisingly, the $1 group later reported genuinely believing the task was enjoyable. Why? Because the small payment wasn't enough to justify lying. Their brains resolved the dissonance by convincing them the task wasn't so bad after all. So what can we learn from this? First, cognitive dissonance is a natural part of being human. It's your brain's way of maintaining harmony between your actions and beliefs. But second, and more importantly, it's a chance to grow. When you catch yourself justifying something, pause and ask, why am I feeling this tension? Instead of rationalizing, explore whether it's time to adjust your actions or maybe even your beliefs. Embracing dissonance isn't comfortable, but it's how we learn, evolve, and become more aligned with who we want to be. And that's worth the temporary discomfort, don't you think? Here's a truth that can be both liberating and frustrating. There are things in life you can control, and there are things you absolutely can't. The trick is knowing the difference and not letting what's outside your control ruin your peace of mind. Let's start with what you can control. Your thoughts, your actions, your reactions, those are all yours to manage. You get to decide how you respond to challenges, how you approach your goals, and how you treat others. Sounds simple, right? Not so fast. The problem is that we often focus too much energy on the things we can't control. Other people's opinions, unexpected setbacks, or even the weather on your big day. And the more we try to control the uncontrollable, the more stressed, frustrated, and powerless we feel. Think about it. Have you ever agonized over someone's reaction to an email or replayed a conversation in your head, wishing you'd said something differently? That's your brain grappling with what it can't change. It's a recipe for mental exhaustion. This chapter invites you to reframe your perspective. Imagine you're holding a hula hoop, and everything inside the hoop represents what you can control: your decisions, your effort, your mindset. Everything outside the hoop, other people's actions, random events, is beyond your reach. Now, here's the challenge. Focus only on what's inside the hoop. Let go of the rest. This isn't about giving up or being indifferent. It's about directing your energy where it matters most. For example, you can't stop a storm from rolling in, but you can choose to pack an umbrella. You can't control how someone perceives you, but you can control how authentically you show up. Shifting your focus to what's actionable helps you feel grounded and in charge. One more thing. This approach isn't about being passive. It's about being strategic. It's about recognizing that sometimes the only thing you can control is your own perspective, and that's more powerful than it seems. By letting go of what eludes you, you create space to fully engage with what you can change. So, here's a challenge. The next time life throws you a curveball, pause and ask yourself, is this inside my hula hoop? If it's not, let it go. And if it is, take action. Simple in theory, tough in practice, but endlessly rewarding when you get the hang of it. Here's a humbling thought. We often think we know far more than we actually do. Our brains love the feeling of confidence, so much so that they sometimes trick us into believing we're experts when, in reality, we're just scratching the surface. Welcome to the illusion of knowledge, a mental quirk that can make us feel like walking encyclopedias, even when we're far from it. Let me ask you, do you know how a zipper works? You probably feel confident you do, right? But if I asked you to describe it step by step, down to the mechanics, chances are you'd stumble. That's the illusion of knowledge in action. It's not that we're deliberately ignorant, it's that our brain fills in the gaps with a sense of familiarity. After all, you've used zippers countless times, so your brain assumes you must understand them. But familiarity doesn't equal understanding. This illusion isn't just about zippers or gadgets. It spills into bigger areas like our opinions on politics, science, or social issues. Think about it. How often do we passionately argue a point, convinced we have all the facts, only to realize later we barely scratched the surface? That's because our brains tend to overestimate how much we really know, relying on simplified mental models to navigate the world. Take another example. Researchers have found that people often rate themselves as more knowledgeable than they actually are. In one experiment, participants were asked to explain how everyday objects work, like a toilet or a ballpoint pen. Initially, most people were confident they understood. But when pressed for details, their confidence crumbled. This phenomenon, known as the knowledge illusion, shows how our brains prefer to assume we know enough rather than confront the gaps in our understanding. So what can we do about this? It starts with embracing curiosity and humility. Instead of assuming you know everything, ask yourself, do I really understand this? Or do I just think I do? Dig deeper. Learn more. And don't be afraid to admit when you don't know something. It's not a weakness. It's a strength. After all, the wisest people are often the ones who know how much they don't know. The bottom line? True knowledge isn't about always having the answers. It's about staying curious, questioning your assumptions, and being open to learning more. Because the more you explore, the more you'll realize just how much there is to discover. You've heard the saying, context is everything, right? Well, its true context shapes the way we see, think, and act more than we realize. Our brain doesn't just process raw information. It interprets that information based on the environment, the situation, and our prior experiences. In other words, how we perceive the world depends heavily on the setting we're in. Let's start with a simple example. Imagine you're at an art museum staring at a modern sculpture. You might find it fascinating, even profound. Now, imagine that same sculpture plopped in the middle of a junkyard. Chances are you'd think it was just trash. The sculpture hasn't changed, but the context has, and that changes how you interpret it. That's how powerful context can be. This isn't just about art. It applies to how we interact with people and situations. 2. Take social interactions. When someone frowns at you, your reaction might depend on where you are. If it's a colleague at work, you might assume they're annoyed with you. If it's a stranger on a busy street, you're more likely to shrug it off. The same facial expression, but the context determines how you perceive it. Here's another example. Studies show that even something as objective as taste can be influenced by context. Wine experts have rated cheap wine served in a fancy bottle higher than expensive wine served in a plain one. Why? Because the brain doesn't evaluate the wine alone, it evaluates the experience, which includes the bottle, the setting, and the expectations. But context doesn't just influence how we see things. It also shapes our behavior. Think about how you act at work versus how you act with friends or family. You're the same person, yet the environment pulls different aspects of your personality to the surface. That's the beauty and complexity of human nature. So why does this matter? Because understanding the power of context can help you make better decisions and be more empathetic. Before jumping to conclusions about a person or situation, take a step back and ask, what's the bigger picture here? What's the bigger picture here? Is this really about me? Or is something else at play? In the end, context isn't just a backdrop, it's an active player in shaping how we experience the world. Recognizing that gives us the power to question our assumptions, see things from multiple perspectives, and navigate life with a little more clarity and understanding. All right, we've made it this far, and now it's time to put everything together. We've learned that our brains are incredible but imperfect, prone to tricks, shortcuts, and biases. But here's the good news. You can train your brain to be more flexible, open, and adaptable. Think of this chapter as your mental toolbox, filled with strategies to help you navigate the world with greater clarity and fewer cognitive missteps. First, let's talk about curiosity. One of the best ways to combat mental rigidity is to stay curious. Ask questions, even about things you think you already understand. When you encounter an idea that challenges your beliefs, resist the urge to reject it outright. Instead, lean in and think, what can I learn from this? The more you cultivate a curious mindset, the less likely you are to fall into the trap of motivated reasoning or cognitive biases. Next, embrace uncertainty. This might sound uncomfortable after all. Who likes not having all the answers? But here's the thing. Being okay with uncertainty can free you from the need to always be right. Instead of jumping to conclusions, pause and consider multiple perspectives. Think of it like keeping a door slightly open, leaving room for new information to walk in. Another tool in your mental toolbox. Mindfulness. This doesn't have to mean long meditation sessions, though those can help. It's as simple as paying attention to your thoughts and feelings without judgment. When you notice yourself getting defensive or stuck in a certain way of thinking, pause and ask, why do I feel this way? Is there another way to look at this? Mindfulness helps you step back from your automatic reactions and approach situations with greater awareness. Here's another big one: practice empathy. Recognize that everyone's brain is working with its own set of assumptions, experiences, and biases just like yours. When you encounter someone with a different perspective, try to see the world through their eyes. You don't have to agree with them, but understanding their context can help you respond with compassion instead of conflict. Finally, give yourself permission to change your mind. We often think of changing our opinions as a weakness, but it's actually a sign of strength. It shows you're willing to learn, grow, and adapt to new information. Remember, mental flexibility isn't about abandoning your beliefs, it's about holding them lightly, ready to adjust when the situation calls for it. In the end, mental flexibility is like a muscle. The more you work at it, the stronger it gets. So, fill your toolbox with curiosity, mindfulness, empathy, and the courage to embrace uncertainty. The more flexible your thinking becomes, the better equipped you'll be to handle the challenges and surprises that life throws your way. So, what have we learned? Throughout your brain is playing tricks on you. Albert Moukheiber reminds us that our brains are incredible but imperfect. They take shortcuts, fill in gaps, and sometimes lead us astray. From how we perceive the world to how we justify our choices, our brains are constantly at work, shaping a reality that isn't always accurate but feels coherent. And that's okay, it's part of being human. The real power lies in awareness. By understanding the ways our minds can mislead us, we gain the ability to question our assumptions, challenge our biases, and approach the world with greater flexibility and compassion. Remember, mental growth isn't about fixing your brain, it's about learning to work with it. If this journey into the mind has intrigued, inspired, or even surprised you, let us know. Like, comment, and share your thoughts below. What resonated with you? Which brain trick caught you off guard? And if you want more content like this, hit subscribe so you don't miss our next exploration into the fascinating world of human behavior. Thanks for listening, and remember, your brain may play tricks on you, but now you've got the tools to outsmart it.